only a select number of figures in the pantheon of art history can match the level of fame accorded Leonardo da Vinci. The very personification of the Renaissance man, Leonardo searched for new knowledge within the burgeoning fields of the humanities and the sciences. One of the so-called Holy Trinity, with Michelangelo and Raphael, of the Italian High Renaissance, Leonardo remains best known today as the painter of some of the world's greatest masterpieces, and for a series of notebooks and drawings that confirm his reputation as the most accomplished polymath of his time. Leonardo di Ser Piero da Vinci, widely considered one of the most gifted and inventive men in history, was born in 1452 in a village near the town of Vinci, Tuscany. The illegitimate son of Piero Frosino di Antonio da Vinci, a Florentine notary and landlord, and Caterina, a peasant girl, who later married an artisan, Leonardo was brought up on the family estate in Anciano by his paternal grandfather. His father married a 16-year-old girl, Albiera, with whom Leonardo was close, but who died at an early age. Leonardo was the oldest of 12 siblings, but was never treated as the illegitimate son. Like his siblings, Leonardo received a basic education in reading, writing, and arithmetic, but he did not show his great passion for learning until adult life. At the age of 14, Leonardo moved to Florence, where he began an apprenticeship at the renowned workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio, an artist who himself had been a student of the early Renaissance master Donatello. It is a matter of record that Leonardo also visited the nearby workshop of Antonio Pollaiuolo. Verrocchio was an important artist in the court of the Medici, a family noted equally for its political power and its generous patronage of the arts. Indeed, Florence attracted many talented young artists, including Domenico Ghirlandaio, Pietro Perugino, and Lorenzo di Credi, and it is indicative of his father's civic standing that Leonardo was able to take up his apprenticeship in such a prestigious workshop. Although Leonardo gained only a basic grasp of Latin and Greek, Florentine artists of this period were compelled to study the humanities as a way of more fully understanding man's place in the modern world, and Leonardo's curious and skeptical mind was nurtured under Verrocchio's mentorship. As art historian Gombrich wrote, "At a time when the learned men at the universities relied on the authority of the admired ancient writers, Leonardo, the painter, would never accept what he read without checking it with his own eyes." Leonardo's name would become closely associated with the intellectual movement, philosophy known as Renaissance humanism. It promoted a return to the values and ideals of the classical world, but also laid emphasis on what it was to be human. Great focus was placed on higher education and the promotion of civic virtue in the belief that by reaching one's full potential, which the Renaissance artist achieved by becoming learned in aesthetic beauty, ethics, logic, and scientific and mathematical principles, one could advance civilization Leonardo would more than measure up to the title of Renaissance Man through his passionate interest in the disciplines of art, anatomy, architecture, geometry, chemistry, and engineering. Tobias and the Angel finished around 1470–1475. This altar painting is attributed to the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio and is now housed in the London National Gallery. Some art historians believe that Leonardo, who was a member of Verrocchio's studio at the time, had painted some of the work. Most likely the fish. David Allen Brown of the National Gallery in Washington attributes the painting of the little dog to Leonardo as well. If these scholars are correct, then this would be the first extant painting of the renowned artist. The image depicts a scene from the Book of Tobit, in which Tobias, son of Tobit, meets the angel Raphael without realizing his true identity. Tobias had been sent by his father to collect a sum of money that the latter had deposited sometime previously in the distant land of Media. According to the story, Raphael represented himself as Tobit's kinsman Azariah and offered to aid and protect Tobias on his journey. Under the guidance of Raphael, Tobias made the journey to Media, accompanied by his faithful dog. Along the way, when washing his feet in the river Tigris, Tobias was attacked by a fish that tried to swallow his foot. Under the instructions of the angel, he seized it and removed the heart, liver, and gallbladder to make a special medicine. And Raphael then told the young man how the fish could be used to cure Tobias's cousin, a young woman named Sarah, who was plagued by the demon of lust. Asmodeus, the worst of demons, had previously abducted and killed every man she married. Through the angel's aid, Tobias was successful in driving the demon away from his cousin, and the two were speedily married. In 1472, after 6 years of apprenticeship, Leonardo became a member of the Guild of St. Luke, a Florentine group of artists and medical doctors. Although his father had set him up with a workshop of his own, Leonardo, now regarded by many of his peers, according to Gombrich, as a strange and rather uncanny being, continued to work with Verrocchio as an assistant for a further 4 or 5 years. Customary to the times, the output of Verrocchio's workshop would have given rise to collaborative efforts between master and apprentice. 2 pictures accredited to Verrocchio, the Baptism of Christ, 1475, and the Annunciation, 1472–75, are seen by art historians such as the Renaissance chronicler Giorgio Vasari to evidence Leonardo's lighter brush strokes when compared with Verrocchio's heavier hand. Madonna of the Pomegranate, also known as the Dreyfus Madonna. This oil painting has been attributed to Verrocchio and Lorenzo di Credi, as well as Leonardo. The anatomy of the Christ child is so poor as to discourage firm attribution by most critics, while some believe that it is a work of Leonardo's youth. This attribution was made by Sweden in 1929. Other art historians, such as Shearman and Morelli, attribute the work to Verrocchio. The Dreyfus Madonna portrays a young woman and infant widely understood to represent the Virgin Mary and baby Jesus. In the painting, the woman holds a pomegranate, which symbolizes fertility. Interesting claims suggest that Leonardo's knowledge on the anatomy and physiology of the heart reflected in his private sketches denotes a significant transition in early cardiology history. The anatomical analysis of this artwork reveals an intuitive sense of perception regarding proper balance that was highly valued by Leonardo, as evidenced throughout his works. By manipulating one detail in Dreyfus Madonna using Paint X program, one can observe how truly meticulous he was about proportionality. Critics have often been divided over attributing this artwork to either Da Vinci himself, Verrocchio, or Lorenzo di Credi. It is safe to say that it features many characteristics similar to other paintings done around the same time by these artists. Nevertheless, based on its anatomy and composition analysis combined with historical knowledge on Da Vinci's style at that period, conclusively indicate that Dreyfus Madonna is likely created by Leonardo da Vinci himself during his early years as an artist, when he mainly worked under Andrea del Verrocchio's apprentice system during this time in Florence, Italy. Madonna of the Carnation. This oil painting was completed by circa 1478 or 1480 and is permanently displayed at the Alte Pinakothek Gallery in Munich. The Madonna of the Carnation, also known as the Madonna with Vase, Madonna with Child or Virgin with Flower. The central and centered motif is the young Virgin Mary seated with baby Jesus on her lap. Depicted in sumptuous clothes and jewelry, with her left hand Mary holds a carnation, red, suggesting blood and the Passion, or it could be interpreted as a healing symbol. The faces are put into light, while all other objects are darker. The flower is covered by a shadow. The child is looking up and the mother looking down, with no eye contact. The setting of the portrait is a room with 2 windows on each side of the figures. Originally, this painting was thought to have been created by Andrea del Verrocchio, but subsequent art historians agree that it is Leonardo's work, probably made during his apprenticeship to Verrocchio. The Virgin's hair, left hand, the drapery and flowers are similar to elements of Leonardo's Annunciation. The canvas is the only work by Leonardo that is permanently on display in Germany. The Baptism of Christ is an oil-on-panel painting finished around 1475 in the studio of the Italian Renaissance painter Andrea del Verrocchio, and generally ascribed to him and his pupil Leonardo da Vinci. Some art historians discern the hands of other members of Verrocchio's workshop in the painting as well. The picture depicts the baptism of Jesus by John the Baptist as recorded in the biblical Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The angel to the left is recorded as having been painted by the youthful Leonardo, a fact which has excited so much special comment and mythology that the importance and value of the picture as a whole and within the oeuvre of Verrocchio is often overlooked. Modern critics also attribute much of the landscape in the background to Leonardo as well. The painting is housed in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. The picture depicts the baptism of Jesus by John the Baptist on the banks of the Jordan River. There are 2 kneeling angels, one holding Jesus' garment and the other with its hands folded, both in front of the symbolization of salvation and life, the palm tree. While barefoot in the river, John the Baptist is clothed in robes with a halo over his head. He's holding a staff with a gold cross at the top as he pours the river water on Jesus' head. Jesus has a halo over his head as he is depicted praying barefoot in the river. He has a small garment covering his genitals with visible pubic hair peeking through. The scroll by John's left hand contains the 2 Latin words Exi Agnius, a reference to a phrase in the description of Jesus' baptism in the Vulgate translation of John 1:29, Exi Agnus Dei, qui tollit peccata mundi. Behold the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sins of the world. There's also a bright-eyed raptor that swoops down over the head of John and into the trees in the background. God's hands can be seen at the top of the painting coming from heaven as it opens up. A dove and rays of sunlight shine through which symbolize the Holy Spirit shining above them, revealing Jesus' divine nature. According to Antonio Billi, 1515, the painting was commissioned by Verrocchio's brother Don Simone, the head of the monastic church of San Salvi around 1468. Verrocchio painted the general landscape along with Christ and St. John early in his career. Another contributor to the central landscape area was one of Verrocchio's assistants, Francesco Botticini. Subsequently, Verrocchio's pupil Leonardo da Vinci was asked to paint an angel in his master's composition. It is probable that Leonardo painted much of the background landscape as it is painted in oil, like the angel, while the rest of the painting is in tempera. According to Giorgio Vasari, who discussed this work in his Lives of both Verrocchio and Leonardo, Leonardo's angel and understanding of colors was so impressive that Verrocchio quit painting. Vasari did not personally know Leonardo, so the veracity of these stories is unknown, although Verrocchio's painting output seems to have ceased abruptly, with his last known painted work being the Virgin and Child with two angels, which he passed on to his assistant Lorenzo di Credi to complete. William Wallace proposes that after Leonardo's creation of the first angel, Verrocchio added the second angel to accompany Leonardo's. Wallace concludes that Verrocchio's Giudizio dell'occhio, true eye, caught the need for this angel to be added to the right to rebalance the composition. Most Italian paintings from the 14th and 15th centuries of this religious subject include two or more angels. According to more recent technical analysis, Verrocchio began this altarpiece around 1468, which was then put aside for some years before Leonardo reworked portions of the painting's surface in the 1470s. The Annunciation is a painting widely attributed to the Italian Renaissance artist Leonardo da Vinci, dated to circa 1472-1476. Leonardo's earliest extant major work, it was completed in Florence while he was an apprentice in the studio of Andrea del Verrocchio. The painting was made using oil and tempera on a large poplar panel and depicts the Annunciation, a popular biblical subject in 15th century Florence. Since 1867, it has been housed in the Uffizi in Florence, the city where it was created. Though the work has been criticized for inaccuracies in its composition, it is among the best-known portrayals of the Annunciation in Christian art. The subject matter of the work is drawn from Luke 1:26-39. It depicts the angel Gabriel announcing to Mary that she would conceive miraculously and give birth to a son to be named Jesus and called the Son of God, whose reign would never end. The subject of the Annunciation was very popular for contemporaneous artworks painted in Christian countries such as Italy and had been depicted many times in Florentine art, including several examples by the early Renaissance painter Fra Angelico. Details of the commission for the painting and its early history remain obscure. The marble table in front of Mary probably is derived from the tomb of Piero and Giovanni de' Medici in the Basilica of San Lorenzo, Florence, which Verrocchio had sculpted during this same period. Of great refinement is the semi-transparent veil under the book of the Holy Scriptures that the Virgin is reading, symbol of the prophecies of the Old Testament. The text on which Mary rests her right hand shows Latin alphabetical characters and abbreviations of the Lexicon Abbreviaturarum, used by scribes since the Middle Ages, without the sequence of letters written on the page having any meaning. The Virgin, in all probability, seems to be meditating on the shape of the letters according to a mystical mode of spiritual reading. The angel holds a Madonna lily, a symbol of Mary's virginity and of the city of Florence. It is presumed that, being a keen observer of nature, Leonardo painted the wings of the angel to resemble those of a bird in flight, but later the wings were lengthened dramatically by another artist. Although this is the earliest known commissioned painting by Leonardo, it has been pointed out that the painting already bears characteristics that are described as demonstrating the signature innovations he introduced in his paintings: sfumato and atmospheric perspective. Following Gustav Wagen methods in 1869, Baron Lippard identified this Annunciation that newly arrived in the Uffizi Gallery from the Church of San Bartolomeo a Monte Oliveto in Florence, as by the young Leonardo, while he still was working in the studio of his master, Andrea del Verrocchio. Before that determination by Lippard, the painting had been attributed to Domenico Ghirlandaio. When the Annunciation came to the Uffizi in 1867 from the Olivetan monastery of San Bartolomeo near Florence, it was ascribed to Domenico Ghirlandaio, who, like Leonardo, was an apprentice in the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio. In 1869, Karl Eduard von Lippard, the central figure of the German expatriate art colony in Florence, recognized the painting as a youthful work by Leonardo. It was one of the first attributions of a surviving work to the youthful Leonardo. Since then, a Leonardo drawing in a collection at Christ Church Picture Gallery in Oxford was recognized as a preparatory drawing for the sleeve of the angel, further supporting the attribution to Leonardo. Occasionally, some immaturity in Leonardo's painting technique is noted by art critics when discussing the spatial relationship between Mary and the desk and the marble table on which it rests. The Benoit Madonna. It is believed that this is the first independent work painted by Leonardo, when no longer under the direct tutelage of his master Verrocchio. There are two of Leonardo's preliminary sketches for this piece in the British Museum, as the composition of a Madonna and Child proved to be one of Leonardo's most popular subjects. This work was extensively copied by young painters, including Raphael, whose own version, the Madonna of the Pinks, reveals Leonardo's influence on the younger artist. For centuries, the painting was presumed to have been lost, then found, then lost, then found, then lost. It had in fact been acquired in Italy by the Russian artillery general and art connoisseur Alexei Ivanovich Korsakov in the 1790s. Upon Korsakov's death, his son sold it for the sum of 1,400 rubles to the Astrakhan fishing merchant Alexander Petrovich Sapozhnikov, who had his own art gallery. It was then passed on to his wealthy philanthropist son, Alexander Alexandrovich Sapochnikov. Finally, when his daughter Maria Sapochnikova married the architect Léon Benoit, the painting became part of the inheritance of the Benoit family. In 1909, the painting was sensationally exhibited in St. Petersburg as part of the Benoit collection. In 1912, the Benoit family considered selling the painting and requested an appraisal from the London art dealer Joseph Duveen, who gave an evaluation of 500,000 francs. The art historian Bernard Berenson made disparaging comments about the painting, raising doubts about its authenticity. One unhappy day I was called to see the Benoit Madonna. I found myself confronted by a young woman with a bald forehead and puffed cheeks, a toothless smile, blear eyes, and a furrowed throat. The uncanny anneal apparition plays with a child who looks like a hollow mask fixed on inflated body and limbs. The hands are wretched, the folds purposeless and fussy, the color like whey. And yet, I had to acknowledge that this painful affair was the work of Leonardo da Vinci. It was hard, but the effort freed me, and the indignation I felt gave me the resolution to proclaim my freedom. Despite these wrangles about attribution, however, the Benoit Madonna was eventually sold to the Imperial Hermitage Museum in 1914 for a record amount. The purchase was made by Ernst Friedrich von Lippard, then curator of paintings at the Hermitage, who identified da Vinci as the artist. The payments were made in installments, continuing even after the 1917 October Revolution. Since 1914, the painting has been exhibited in the Hermitage Museum, St. Petersburg. Ginevra de Benci. Painted while still in his early 20s, Ginevra de Benci is one of Leonardo's earliest known works. It gives us the first example of his signature portraiture technique, whereby he abandoned the conventional half-face profile pose in favor of a three-quarter pose. Through the three-quarter rotation of his sitter, Leonardo gives us a fuller facial portrait that places the personality of the subject above their status. It was a humanistic technique that would define his future portraits, including such works as the Mona Lisa. Indeed, Leonardo is thought to be the first Italian to represent his sitter in such a way, and it would become a convention of high Renaissance portraiture. There's also a strong suggestion, traces of fingerprints on the painting's surface, that Leonardo used his fingers to delicately shade Ginevra's flesh tones. As the National Gallery of Art in Washington states, the planes of her face subtly modeled, she may have come to life before viewers in a fashion more vivid than any other painting they had seen before. And adds that one of Leonardo's contemporaries wrote that he painted Ginevra d'Amerigo Benci with such perfection that it seemed to be not a portrait, but Ginevra herself. Ginevra de Benci was 16 years old and from an affluent family. She was well educated and had earned a reputation as a fine poet and conversationalist. Her milk-white complexion is flawless and her blank expression is difficult to read. But, as the National Gallery of Art in Washington explains, young women of the time were expected to comport themselves with dignity and modesty. virtue was prized and guarded, and a girl's beauty was thought to be a sign of goodness. Portraitists were expected to enhance, as needed, a woman's attractiveness according to the period's standards of beauty. It is likely that Leonardo was commissioned to paint Ginevra's portrait on the occasion of her betrothal, thought to be to a man named Luigi Niccolini. But as the National Gallery of Art in Washington states, the painting also reflects a cultural phenomenon of the Italian Renaissance period, platonic love affairs between well-mannered gentlemen and ladies. Such affairs, often conducted from afar, focused on effusive literary expressions that displayed the courtiers' and ladies' sophistication. Indeed, Ginevra is known to have had many admirers, including Bernardo Bembo, the Venetian ambassador to Florence, and Lorenzo de' Medici, who both composed poems in her honor. The painting is also of significance for its reverse side, which carries an emblem in the form of a wreath of laurel and palm encircled with a sprig of juniper, and a scroll featuring the phrase Virtutem forma decorat, beauty adorns virtue. The National Gallery of Art in Washington states that the central juniper, Ginepro in Italian, a cognate of Ginevra's name and thus her symbol, also represents chastity. The palm stands for moral virtue, while the laurel indicated artistic or literary inclinations. In 1476, Leonardo was accused of sodomy with 3 other men. Homosexuality was illegal and punishable, not only by imprisonment but also by public humiliation and even death. Leonardo was acquitted through lack of corroborative evidence, which has been attributed to the fact that his friends, lovers, came from powerful Florentine families. Perhaps because of the stigma and chastisement, Leonardo kept a low profile over the next few years, with little or no record of his activities during this time. Leonardo's earliest commissions came in 1481 from the monastery of San Donato a Scopeto for a panel painting of the Adoration of the Magi, unfinished, and an altar painting for the St. Bernard Chapel in the Palazzo della Signoria, never begun. However, Leonardo stopped work on the commissions to move to Milan after accepting an offer from the city's duke to join his court. He was listed in the royal register as Pictor et Ingeniarius Ducalis, painter and engineer of the duke. Saint Jerome in the Wilderness. This is unfinished painting by the Italian Renaissance artist Leonardo da Vinci, dated circa 1480-1490. A recent study linked to the lady with an ermine carried out by Leonardo da Vinci at the same time supports this hypothesis. The composition of the painting has been drafted in monochrome onto the primed wooden panel. At an unknown date after Leonardo's death, the panel was cut into 5 pieces before eventually being restored into its original form, minus a very small triangle. The oil draft of an unfinished painting depicts Saint Jerome in advanced age during his retreat to the Syrian desert, where he lived the life of a hermit. The saint kneels in a rocky landscape, gazing toward a crucifix which can be discerned faintly sketched in at the extreme right of the painting. In Jerome's right hand, he holds a rock with which he is traditionally shown beating his chest in penance. At his feet is the lion which became a loyal companion after he extracted a thorn from its paw. The lion, the stone, and a cardinal's hat are the traditional attributes of the saint. On the left-hand side of the panel, the background is a distant landscape of a lake surrounded by precipitous mountains shrouded in mist. To the right-hand side, the only discernible feature is a faintly sketched church, seen through the opening in the rocks. The church's presence may allude to Jerome's position in Western Christianity as one of the doctors of the church. The composition of the painting is innovative for the oblique trapezoid form of the figure of the saint. The angular forms contrast with the sinuous form of the lion, which transcribes an S across the bottom of the painting. The lion is also a symbol of power and strength associated with the Gospel of Mark, which Jerome translated into Latin. The form of Saint Jerome prefigures that of the Virgin Mary and the Virgin of the Rocks. The rendering of the muscles in the neck and shoulders is seen as the first of Leonardo's anatomical drawings. The panel has been reduced in size, and the remaining part was cut in 2 at some point in its history and reassembled by the early 19th century collector, Cardinal Fesch, the uncle of Napoleon Bonaparte. Popular legend claims that the cardinal discovered the part of the panel with the saint's torso being offered as a tabletop in a shop in Rome. Many years later, he found another piece being used as a wedge for a shoemaker's bench. The Adoration of the Magi is an unfinished early painting by the Italian Renaissance artist Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo was given the commission by the Augustinian monks of San Donato in Scopeto in Florence in 1481, but he departed for Milan the following year, leaving the painting unfinished. It has been in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence since 1670. The Virgin Mary and Child are depicted in the foreground and form a triangular shape with the Magi kneeling in adoration. Behind them is a semicircle of accompanying figures, including what may be a self-portrait of the young Leonardo on the far right. In the background on the left is the ruin of a pagan building, on which workmen can be seen apparently repairing it. On the right are men on horseback fighting and a sketch of a rocky landscape. The ruins are a possible reference to the Basilica of Maxentius, which, according to medieval legend, the Romans claimed would stand until a virgin gave birth. It is supposed to have collapsed on the night of Christ's birth. In fact, it was not even built until a later date. The ruins dominate a preparatory perspective drawing by Leonardo, which also includes the fighting horsemen. The palm tree in the center has associations with the Virgin Mary, partly due to the phrase, "You are stately as a palm tree" from the Song of Solomon, which is believed to prefigure her. Another aspect of the palm tree can be the usage of the palm tree as a symbol of victory for ancient Rome, whereas in Christianity it is a representation of martyrdom, triumph over death. So in conclusion, we can say that the palm, in general, represents triumph. The other tree in the painting is from the carob family. The seeds from this tree are used as a unit of measurement for valuable stones and jewels. It is therefore associated with crowns, suggesting Christ as the King of Kings or the Virgin as the future Queen of Heaven, as well as that this is nature's gift to the newborn Christ. As with Michelangelo's Donitondo, the background is probably supposed to represent the pagan world supplanted by the Christian world, inaugurated by the events in the foreground. The artist uses bright colors to illuminate the figures in the foreground of the painting. The Virgin and Child are in fact painted yellow, the color of light. The trees are painted blue, an unusual color for trees of any kind. On the right side, the most credible self-portrait of Leonardo da Vinci as a 30-year-old can be seen, according to several critics. Much of the composition of this painting was influenced by an earlier work of the northern artist Rogier van der Weyden. The relationship between figures, space and the viewer's standpoint, the high horizon, slightly raised viewpoint, space receding into the far distance, and a central figural group poised before a rock formation in the middle of the landscape, are all copied from van der Weyden's Entombment of Christ, 1460, Uffizi. Virgin of the Rocks, Louvre version. This is one of two paintings by Leonardo of the same subject, which are identical except for two significant details. The current painting is usually housed in the Louvre, and the other is on display in the National Gallery, London. Both paintings depict the Madonna and Christ child with the infant John the Baptist and an angel in a rocky setting that gives the paintings their usual name. The significant compositional differences are in the gaze and right hand of the angel. There are many minor ways in which the works differ, including the colors, lighting, flora, and the use of sfumato, the technique of softening lines. The Louvre version is considered by most art historians to be the earlier of the two, dating from around 1483–1486. Most authorities agree that the work is entirely by Leonardo and it is 8 cm taller than the London version. The first certain record of the painting was in 1625 when it was part of the French royal collection. It is generally accepted that this work was produced for a commission of 1483 in Milan. It is believed it was privately sold by Leonardo and the London version painted at a later date to fulfill the commission. Virgin of the Rocks, London National Gallery version. Originally thought to have been partially painted by Leonardo's assistants, recent studies by the National Gallery have revealed that this work may have been painted entirely by Leonardo. It was commissioned for the Chapel of the Confraternity of the Immaculate Conception in the Church of San Francesco Maggiore in Milan. It was sold by the church, very likely in 1781 and certainly by 1785 when it was bought by Gavin Hamilton, an English painter and dealer who took it to England. After passing through various collections, it was bought by the National Gallery in 1880. In June 2005, the painting was examined by infrared reflectogram. This imaging revealed a draft of a different painting beneath the visible one. The draft portrays a woman, probably kneeling, with her right hand outstretched and her left on her heart. Some researchers believe that the artist's original intention was to paint an adoration of the infant Jesus. Many other pentimenti are also visible under X-ray or infrared examination. The head of a woman. Also known as La Scapigliata, this painting dates from approximately 1500 and is housed in the Galleria Nazionale of Parma. The work was left unfinished and was mentioned for the first time in the House of Gonzaga collection in 1627. It is perhaps the same work that Ippolito Calandra in 1531 had suggested to hang in the bedroom of Margaret Paleologa, wife of Federico II Gonzaga. In 1501, the Marquesas wrote to Pietro Novellara asking if Leonardo could paint a Madonna for her privately. Lita Madonna. Housed in the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, this canvas is generally attributed to Leonardo, though some cited Giovanni Antonio Boltraffio as the artist. There are numerous replicas of the Lita Madonna by other Renaissance painters, and there is a preliminary sketch by Leonardo of the Madonna's head in the Louvre. The image depicts the Madonna nursing the infant Jesus, whose awkward posture has led some scholars to attribute parts of the painting to Leonardo's pupil Boltraffio. Other clues that suggest Leonardo was not the only artist to have a hand in the painting are the harsh outlines of the Madonna and Child, and the simplistic landscape. This work was painted sometime in the 1480s for the Visconti rulers of Milan and soon passed to the Lita family, in whose possession it would remain for centuries. In 1865, Alexander II of Russia acquired the painting from Count Lita, the former minister to St. Petersburg, and deposited the painting in the Hermitage Museum. The museum had the painting transferred from wood to canvas. There is some speculation as to why the move to Milan was so appealing to the artist when his Florentine career was in the ascendancy. It may have been that his decision was to put the earlier sexual scandal behind him. While that may have been a contributory factor, it seems more likely that what the historian Ludwig Heinrich Heidenreich called Leonard's gracious but reserved personality and elegant bearing was a better fit for the austere Milanese court. As Heidenreich writes, it may have been that the rather sophisticate spirit of Neoplatonism prevailing in the Florence of the Medici went against the grain of Leonardo's experience-oriented mind, and that the more strict academic atmosphere of Milan attracted him. Moreover, he was no doubt enticed by Duke Ludovico Sforza's brilliant court and the meaningful projects awaiting him there. Leonardo worked in Milan between 1482 and 1499. Between 1483-86, he worked on the Virgin of the Rocks, an altarpiece commissioned by the Confraternity of the Immaculate Conception. For reasons that are unknown, Leonardo entered into a decade-long legal dispute with the confraternity, leading Leonardo to paint a second version of the work in 1508. In 1485, he undertook a diplomatic mission to Hungary on behalf of the Duke. He met with the influential Hungarian king, Matthias Corvinus, and worked on preparations for court festivals. While in Hungary, he also worked on engineering and architectural plans, including for the dome of the cathedral in Milan. While in Milan, Leonardo spent a great deal of time observing human anatomy. He closely studied the way in which human bodies moved, the way they were built and proportioned, how they interacted in social engagement and communication, and their habits of gesture and expression. This was a time-consuming and painstaking undertaking that helps explain perhaps why there are so few paintings dating from this period. Just 6 in total, with suggestion of a further 3 commissions either now lost or never commenced. Yet an extraordinarily large library of drawings. These are now testament to Leonardo's mastery of observation and his ability to convey human emotion. Lady with an Ermine. This painting was completed by 1490, and the subject of the portrait has been identified as Cecilia Gallerani, who was the mistress of Lodovico Sforza, Duke of Milan, to whom Leonardo was in service. The piece is housed in the Czartoryski Museum, Kraków, Poland, and is cited in the museum's guide as the first truly modern portrait. The portrait was painted in oils on a wooden panel at a time when the medium of oil paint was relatively new to Italy. Leonardo was one of the first artists to adopt the new medium, skillfully exploiting its qualities to great effect. This work particularly demonstrates Leonardo's expertise in depicting the human form. The outstretched hand of Cecilia was painted with great detail. Leonardo delineates every contour of each fingernail, each wrinkle around her knuckles, and even the flexing of the tendon in her bent finger. At the time of her portrait, Cecilia was about 16. She was one of a large family, neither rich nor noble. Her father served for a time at the Duke's court. Cecilia was renowned for her beauty, her scholarship, and her poetry. She was betrothed at the age of about 10 years to a young nobleman of the house of Visconti, but the marriage was called off. Cecilia became the mistress of the Duke and bore him a son, though he chose to marry a girl from a nobler family, Beatrice d'Este. The painting portrays a half-length figure, the body of the young woman turned at a 3/4 angle towards her right, with her face turned towards her left. Her gaze is directed neither straight ahead nor towards the viewer, but points indirectly beyond the picture's frame. In her arms, Cecilia holds a small white-coated stoat known as an ermine. Cecilia's dress is comparatively simple, revealing that she is not a noblewoman. Her coiffure, known as a cozone, confines her hair smoothly to her head with 2 circlets of hair bound on either side of her face and a long plait at the back. Her hair is held in place by a fine gauze veil with a woven border of gold wound threads, a black band and a sheath over the plait. There are several interpretations of the significance of the ermine in her portrait. The ermine, a stoat in its winter coat, was a traditional symbol of purity, as it was believed that an ermine would face death rather than soil its white coat. Lady with an Ermine was acquired in Italy by Prince Adam Jerzy Czartoryski, the son of Princess Isabella Czartoryska and Prince Adam Kazimierz Czartoryski in 1798, and incorporated into the Czartoryskis' family collections at Puławy in 1800. The inscription on the top left-hand corner of the painting, Ella Belle Ferrioniere, Leonardo da Vinci, was probably added by a restorer shortly after its arrival in Poland and before the background was overpainted. The painting traveled extensively in the 19th century. For example, Princess Czartoryski rescued it in advance of the invading Russian army in 1830, then concealed the painting, sending it to Dresden and on to the Czartoryski place of exile in Paris, the Hôtel Lambert, finally returning it to Kraków in 1882. In 1939, almost immediately after the German occupation of Poland, it was seized by the Nazis and sent to the Kaiser Friedrich Museum in Berlin. In 1940, Hans Frank, the Governor-General of Poland, requested that it be returned to Kraków, where it previously hung in his suite of offices. At the end of the Second World War, Lady with an Ermine was discovered by Allied troops in Frank's country home in Bavaria. It has since returned to Poland and is once more on display at the Czartoryski Museum in Kraków. the Vitruvian Man. This famous drawing was created circa 1487, accompanied with notes based on the work of the famed architect Vitruvius. The drawing was made in pen and ink on paper, depicting a male figure in two superimposed positions with his arms and legs apart and simultaneously inscribed in a circle and square. The drawing and text are sometimes called the Canon of Proportions. Housed in the Gallery dell'Accademia in Venice, it is only occasionally displayed. The drawing is based on the correlations of ideal human proportions with geometry described by the ancient Roman architect Vitruvius in Book 3 of his treatise De Architectura. Vitruvius described the human figure as being the principal source of proportion among the classical orders of architecture. This image exemplifies the blend of art and science during the Renaissance and provides the perfect example of Leonardo's keen interest in proportion. In addition, this picture represents a cornerstone of Leonardo's attempts to relate man to nature. Portrait of a musician. This oil on wood painting has been attributed to Leonardo by some scholars and was probably painted in 1490. The subject of the painting was at one time thought to be Francino Gaffurio, who was the maestro di capella of the Milanese cathedral. Although some believe it to be a portrait of Gaffurio, others think the subject of the portrait is the famous Leonardo da Pistoia of the court of Cosimo de' Medici, painted after his discovery of the Corpus Hermeticus. The musician is depicted holding a piece of paper which is a musical score with notes written upon it. The man is positioned in a three-quarter position and he is staring at something outside the spectator's field of vision. Compared to the detailed face of the musician, the red hat, his tunic, and his hair seem to be the work of another painter. Art historians have conceded that the quality of the depiction of the young man's face points towards Leonardo's own composition, though the partition sheet and his hand may have been added by another artist.